Good afternoon, good evening, Niner faithful. It is Monday, beginning a new week, still in the off season, still enjoying it, still looking forward to that first action that we actually see out there on the field, but very excited to welcome my guest today, Rohan Chakravarthi, to the program. Rohan covers the 49ers for 49ers Web Zone, and he's the co-host of 49ers Red Zone podcast. Rohan, welcome to the show. How's the start of the week treating you so far?
It's been good. I mean, obviously it's a Monday, a little bit of a late start to the morning, obviously, but getting back into it, mini camp was this weekend. So now we're starting to kind of get into the groove of the 49ers offseason in a way. In a week, we're going to see Trey Lance for the first time.
Yes.
Offseason program kind of standing. So I'm excited for sure. How are you?
I'm very excited. I'm very excited to see Trey Lance out there. There has been just a lot of nonsense that has come out. I say this often on the program, but in the lack of communication, humans tend to hallucinate. When we don't have information, when we don't have new information, fresh information, we fill in the rest with our brains. And that's what's happening with Trey Lance, right? We haven't seen anything from him aside from a few practice throws with him down in Orange County with Brandon Ayuk. And so the brain tends to fill in the rest. And you have this entire camp of people who are doubtful of Trey Lance, of his skill set, of his ability to translate from North Dakota State to the NFL. And I think those people are filling in the narrative with that negative connotation. Then you have those like myself that are very excited for Trey Lance, that are looking forward to him proving exactly what he can do in this league with his physical skill set and the way in which he applies himself to his craft. And so I'll be anxious to get to that, back to that reality, away from those hallucinations.
Oh yeah, me too. Definitely me too. Finally, like some sense of realism in a way, because now we
Yes.
can't be grabbing for things. It's actually what's out there on the field.
Yes, it will be phenomenal to be reacting to things that have actually happened and not more speculation. So let's focus a little bit on that speculation today. Let's talk a little bit about what the 49ers might be thinking about today. And for me, what came up, and this is in thanks to Matt Mayoko, who, I'm an old school 49er fan. I've read and listened to Matt Mayoko for a long time. I have a great deal of respect for him. I know that his representation there with NBC does place him as a bit of a mouthpiece for the organization, but I still do view Matt Mayoko as coming out with unbiased content, that he does tell it as he sees it. There just happens to be fairly good alignment between Matt and the organization. I think that's why it's such a natural fit for him. And Matt comes out today and puts together a great piece around Jimmy Garoppolo and the big dates that are coming up as we get into the preseason program. So we'll go through a couple of those and answer the question, should Jimmy Garoppolo ever practice for the 49ers again? He had surgery on March 8th. Training camp begins at the end of July. So the alignment there is pretty good from a health standpoint. There's every chance that Jimmy is going to be ready to throw when we get to that point in July, when the 49ers are coming back together. But in the article, it's pointed out that if Jimmy does practice and he gets injured, then the $24.2 million in non-guaranteed salary all of a sudden becomes guaranteed. Plus, the Niners get zero production from the quarterback position for that $24 million. That's a worst case scenario, to both eat up $24 million and get nothing in return for it. If the 49ers put him on the 53-man roster to start week one, because Jimmy is an NFL vet, his salary becomes fully guaranteed. Cutting him prior to week one saves the 49ers $25.5 in cap savings. So the first question that I have is, in your opinion, should the 49ers, in a risk-reward standpoint, should they let him play in the preseason games?
I believe they shouldn't. And I mean, obviously there is risk and reward. To me, the only way that Jimmy Garoppolo really suits up for the 49ers this year is if the issues with Trey Lance's inaccuracy and perhaps even touch surface over training camp, surface over OTAs, and get to a point where the 49ers believe that he can't win them games. However, given the body of work that we've seen from Trey Lance, not only through his progression from week 5 last year to week 17 while on the while in the shadows in a way, as
Right.
well as the ethic that we've seen this offseason, there isn't necessarily data to back up that kind of point. So I personally don't believe that's true. And with that said, as a backup, I think that it would be harmful for the 49ers if they played him in preseason or in training camp. If you want to roster him, sure, roster him and guarantee his salary in week 1. However, the 49ers are a team that loves flexibility. And if you're going to, I think playing him obviously aggravates the chance of injury. And like you just said via Matt Mayoko, that $24.2 million in non-guaranteed money becomes fully guaranteed. That's his base salary in 2022. And that's an issue for the 49ers because it puts them once again in another hole. And before we continue, I just want to bring up another case that the 49ers have had where it turned against them, and that is the case of Dee Ford. Dee Ford obviously got that 5-year, $85.5 million deal with the 49ers back in 2019 after they traded a second-round pick for him. When you look at the deal originally, it was a no-brainer. Only $19.5 million in guaranteed money at signing, $33.5 million or $33.35 million in total guarantees. It seems like that's a team-friendly contract. However, so much of that money was guaranteed for injury, and that's the reason the 49ers have had to hold on for Dee Ford for as long as they have. Additionally, they're probably going to have to cut him with a post-June 1st designation. He carries a dead cap hit of over $14 million currently, and I think they've seen this situation play out already. So I think, yeah, going back, I don't think that they should play him just to hold their cards up until week 1.
That makes a ton of sense. And you bring in the Dee Ford situation, and that is something that needs to be front of mind for the 49ers front office. I like what you said there about playing Jimmy Garoppolo and specifically talking about getting the maximum number of reps for Trey Lance, because as you assert, the 49ers do need to establish whether Trey Lance is that guy. I happen to believe Trey Lance is that guy. I believe that you're optimistic in that vein as well. But the 49ers are risking a great deal in transition from one quarterback who, say what you want about him, he's an average quarterback. He's, in my opinion, somewhere between the 15th to the 20th best quarterback starting in the NFL, if you look at his body of work over the last couple of years. But you knew that you've hit sort of a ceiling there. And to make that transition from one quarterback to the next when you're still in potentially a playoff window, potentially a Super Bowl window, there's a lot of risk there. There's a lot of potential egg on your face if it goes poorly. So allowing Trey Lance to get the maximum number of snaps, a maximum number of reps in preseason, allow them to let him grow, let him mature, let him learn the system just as much as he can, and illustrate for the 49ers just how ready he is to take over that starting role. If you give those reps to Jimmy Garoppolo, you've now muddled the situation. And for me, just the pure emotional standpoint of the locker room, of the health of the organization in bringing Jimmy Garoppolo back and splitting those reps and having those of us that talk about the 49ers consistently bringing up, will it be Trey? I think that type of noise can have an impact, in particular, on a young player.
Alluded to earlier that Jimmy Garoppolo likely won't have much practice in training camp at all this offseason, meaning Trey Lance should get most of those reps because you're not going to give first-team reps to Nate Sudfeld. So I think we do get the best description of what Trey Lance truly is this offseason.
The extreme pessimistic views that are out there when all the evidence that I have personally seen with my own 2 eyes points in a positive direction. Just want to take a moment to appreciate the newest member of the channel, Joshua, coming in. Joshua, the newest sneakerhead here on the channel. Welcome, Joshua. Joshua, I hope you can call in to the call-in show that we have on Thursdays. Very, very excited for that. All right, so I want to take it one step further, and I want to ask the question, should the 49ers even really allow Jimmy Garoppolo to practice? We've just established that there's a considerable amount of risk when you're live fire, live bullets in a preseason game. Jimmy Garoppolo obviously has a little bit of a tendency to pick up those injuries. Practice seems potentially a little bit different. The 49ers have to consider the question, are there teams out there waiting in the wings to potentially trade for Jimmy Garoppolo that want to see the shoulder healthy again? Do they benefit from having Jimmy Garoppolo on tape to some extent, or are we still back to the same question of risk versus reward and the risk being too great?
I think Practice, we shouldn't. Preseason, I also think we shouldn't. Here's why. The 49ers made an investment in backup Nate Sudfeld this offseason. They paid him $2 million in guaranteed money. And if you make that investment, you're assuming that he's going to be your backup quarterback in 2022. So I think if you give those reps to Jimmy Garoppolo, you're not giving Nate Sudfeld a chance to prove himself as a backup quarterback. And you're also making the decision harder because you don't have enough game film for you to see whether Nate Sudfeld can potentially take over that backup role to where you find Jimmy Garoppolo expendable and cuttable prior to the season. So I think, honestly, Jimmy Garoppolo, he's at a point in his career where you know what he'll produce on a game-to-game basis. I don't think there's necessarily room for improvement, only room for regression. So especially with Kyle Shanahan and his choice to kind of keep everything hidden in a way, and potentially if there's some things they want to install with Jimmy Garoppolo that they haven't yet, I think he'd like to keep that hidden. So instead, give the other two guys reps, see if you're comfortable moving with those two guys, maybe even Brock Purdy as the quarterbacks for your future, especially in 2022. And then I think giving all of those guys the majority of the reps provides you with an accurate analysis, whether or who should start, but also who should back up in 2022.
So off the cuff question here for you, because you did bring the name to the table. What are your feelings? What is your level of optimism around Brock Purdy? Do you think the 49ers are going to see enough from him this offseason to where they'll actually consider trying to get him onto the 53-man roster and cutting a starting caliber body or a contributor in order to fit that third quarterback? Or do they try and just sneak him onto the practice squad and cross their fingers that someone like Seattle doesn't see enough from him to come in and swoop him up?
Now, we know Seattle loves to take our guys, but
yes, they do.
When we look at it, I don't think Brock Purdy makes the 53 just because of the investment that they already put in Sudfeld. So even if Purdy perhaps chooses to be the better player, I think $2 million is more than the 500. Like the one case that I'll point to last year was Michael Pruitt. I thought a lot of people thought Michael Pruitt would make the roster, given he got $500,000 in guaranteed money. The 49ers elected to cut him just because he never made his ground in training camp and rocked with their three group of Kittle, Warner, and then Ross Dwelly. However, I think the $2 million difference and the leadership that Nate Sudfeld provides in a very young quarterback room is important for the 49ers. That's why I do think that he remains the backup. Brock Purdy as the practice squad guy, I think they view him as their next Nate Sudfeld in a way. What I mean by that is they'll put him on the practice squad for year one, have him develop, potentially take over as the role because Sudfeld is only on a one-year deal, and he's also an aging quarterback. Put him on the practice squad and then elevate him to the backup role next year if he proves enough.
That would be a phenomenal situation for the 49ers to have a second young quarterback on a cost-controlled contract and be able to spend that money elsewhere on the roster. In answer to the question about letting Jimmy Garoppolo practice, I'm with Darren Worthington here in emphatically stating, hell no, he shouldn't. My stance is no goddamn way, Darren. So you and I are in alignment on the enthusiasm there. The risk just isn't worth the reward. The 49ers, as we said earlier, are risking that 25.5 in potential cap space for what? Maybe a third round draft pick in return for Jimmy Garoppolo, a second rounder if there's an injury to a starting quarterback for a playoff contender, and the 49ers can really squeeze that team in sort of a Sam Bradford type of a trade deal. For $25 million, you can get a whole contract done on a fairly elite level player at various positions within the NFL. Obviously, to have both that cap space and a premium pick is better, but to me, the juice just isn't worth the squeeze on this one. The 49ers should be cautious and do what they can to insulate themselves against the worst case scenario, which would be a Jimmy Garoppolo injury where they have already guaranteed his salary through said injury, and he's stuck on the roster for the final year, contributing nothing. All right, let's transition a little bit to another unknown for the 49ers. Will they, won't they get rid of Jimmy Garoppolo? We don't know. Will Alex Mack be back? At this point in time, it's still a little bit of an unknown. So let's explore the potential that he's not. I tend to shy towards the optimistic here, but let's see. You're looking at the potential replacements for him if he's gone. Those that are currently on the roster. Obviously, the veterans in Jake Brendel, who the 49ers have specifically mentioned as being the backup center for the team. You have Daniel Brunskill, Obviously, right guard for the 49ers. Can he shift over to center? We've seen him in the role before. And then a couple of rookies coming in, Donovan West, Nick Zakelj, and Jason Poe. So out of all of those, do you feel like any of the young players on the roster that you're optimistic about any of these youthful players and their ability to contribute in year one if needed?
Yeah, so I personally thought Donovan West should have been a mid-round draft pick in this class. I think a lot of people evaluating this class would probably say the same. Obviously, I think, at least personally, to what Donovan West talked about, I think his surgery on his thumb or his hand earlier this offseason probably was a factor, especially with a ton of depth, probably was a factor in him falling in this class. He alluded to that. He also alluded to just the amount of depth in this class as to why he went undrafted. But I do think that his knowledge of a zone scheme that he played at Arizona State, as well as his athleticism and the guard and center versatility, all contribute to his play style and how he can contribute in this specific offense. I think he's not necessarily the best fit for many offenses, but for the 49ers, I think that I have optimism that he could be a contributing factor, not necessarily in 2022, but at least for our future.
I agree. And it was interesting to watch what happened to the center class within the draft. It was a deep class. And some of it was a domino effect in my view. Some of the earlier selections seemed to slip a little bit. And then that became the domino effect that someone like Donovan, who was listed in many respectable publications as approximately a fifth round grade as a draft choice, did in fact fall out of the draft. And the Niners were obviously all over that with the ASU connection, John Lynch, Herm Edwards, godfathers to each other's children. They are on the phone. Their wives are connecting. I love the fact that when they picked Brandon Ayuk, it was actually John Lynch's wife that reached out to Herm Edwards' wife, and the connection started there. So there are some cross ties there. The Niners obviously valued him in giving him the $100,000 contract, which is a big one for an undrafted free agent. That strikes me as the most likely scenario. It doesn't give me comfort. If you have any inclination that you're losing your veteran starting center, and you're talking about a rookie quarterback coming into his second year, about to have his first meaningful starts playing alongside a rookie center, that gives me some weird feelings, right? I would rather have a veteran center like a JC Treader, who is available via free agency. That would make me feel better, but I do see the fit and I do see the talent in Donovan West. I will be keeping an eye on him this offseason. Do you see this no news about Mack? A lot of important dates have passed us by. It felt like there could be an announcement prior to the draft in free agency. Felt like there could be an announcement coming in the draft, as there was with Joe Staley when we moved on to Trent Williams. And I had my fingers crossed if that was the case, we pulled off some sort of another miracle trade as we did to bring Trent Williams into the building. And then we passed the draft. Nothing came of it. Now we are into and beyond that calculation period for the compensatory draft picks, and we still haven't signed the veteran. Does no news equal good news when it comes to Alex Mack? Are you optimistic about the return at this point?
Now, obviously, I thought the draft strategy would be somewhat telling. And for me, at first, I was like, I was pretty certain, not certain, but I was pretty optimistic that Alex Mack would come back. Obviously, when you don't draft a center, instead choose to draft other positions at the offensive line, specifically two guards in Spencer Burford and Nick Zakelj, I thought maybe Alex Mack would be coming back. But then we hear that John Lynch alludes that Nick Zakelj could play center. Then we also see the two free agent signings of Donovan West and Jason Poe at the center position. And then you start to think a little more. So right now, that optimistic kind of view of mine kind of simmered down a bit. Now it's still more in the unknown. And this far into free agency and into the offseason program, it is somewhat turning on the opposite side because OTA start for the 49ers on May 23rd. Alex Mack, we don't know if he's going to be there or not. We haven't heard any report from either Mack's side or the 49ers. And obviously, if Alex Mack doesn't show up for the beginning of the offseason program, that there might be a couple of more questions, given that he hasn't been in the building reportedly yet. So that's the one question I do have. I think OTAs will be another inflection point for whether we know on Alex Mack's return or not. But at the moment, I am probably on the trending down part.
Very nice. I think OTAs is that next domino where we will get some news about it. If we do, get to that point where Alex Mack announces that he's not coming back and it becomes official. By the way, just going to bring in Lee Ving pointing out PFF had Donovan West close to the top 100 on their big board. So we look at that. We look at the potential Donovan West has, the fit within San Francisco's system. The other players on the roster that are available for competition at the center position. In a worst case scenario where Mack is gone, do you view the 49ers to be in bad shape? And if so, just how bad do you see it?
Now, I view it two ways. One is depth and two is talent. Obviously, at the moment, I don't think there is a replacement that replaces Alex Mack's talent that he has at the position, especially given veteran leadership, which is important at the center position for the 49ers offense. Obviously, JC Tretter is still out in free agency, but there hasn't been necessarily reported talks on a movement with JC Tretter. Probably the 49ers don't want to disclose their plans. However, at the moment, just speaking on the roster, I do believe them to be insulated with depth. I just spoke on three guys, Nick Zakelj, Jason Poe, and also Donovan West, who all could compete at the center position during the offseason program for the 49ers. Additionally, we brought up two names earlier, Daniel Brunskill and Jake Brendel, who both have center experience. Brunskill played center for the last 8 games in 2020, and having a predominantly center role going into this season could fare with better results than his 2020 season when he was thrust in the role after being somewhat of a versatile offensive lineman. Jake Brendel obviously has been the backup center. Like we said earlier, John Lynch said Jake Brendel's name a ton during that post-draft press conference. Like it was crazy just to hear Jake Brendel's name over and over again. So I think that these factors somewhat into the competition. I think so. Depth-wise, I think we are insulated. Obviously, a lot of that depth is unknowns given that they're undrafted or young players. But I do believe that we should be fairly well depth-wise to see where a competition places these guys as to who starts.
To me, that depth comment is very apropos, that we do have depth there, but it feels an awful lot like the safety position where, yes, you have depth, but you have no clear front runner. You have no one that you say to yourself, oh, they're going to snatch that starting role and they're going to run with it. You say to yourself, well, there's a bunch of them and they all seem mildly capable, right? There's room for optimism in every one of those options, but it's a bit unclear who might step forward and be the front runner. Now, there's plenty of time for that to work itself out. The 49ers may have landed stars at both roles. It's not infrequent in the NFL to see someone rise to fame given the new opportunity, new team, fresh system, better fit, whatever it is. These NFL players are of the caliber that when it all clicks, it can really come together for them. And there's nothing preventing either players at the center position or those competing at the strong safety to actually click and be a quality starter. But given that there is some risk there, would you prefer a strategy if Mack confirmed his retirement where the 49ers said, no, iron sharpens iron. We've got depth. We've got competition. We're going into camp and we're competing. Or would you prefer them to go out and try the free agency market, see if JC Tretter would have interest in coming in, or some of the other names that sit out there as veteran centers to add even further depth or a clear-cut starter?
I think both strategies have their benefits. Obviously, the former strategy it presents some sort of trust with your group, and I think that that's important in a way. But the latter strategy tends to be what the 49ers have done in the past. When Kyle Shanahan came in, the first major free agent signing he had at the center position was Weston Richburg. 5 years,
right.
$7.5 million. It was a veteran to take over the position that the 49ers value most on that offensive line, alongside that left tackle position. Then, after a experimentation year during Richburg's kind of injury season in 2019 or 2020, they had Ben Garland start there and Daniel Brunskill start there. They go ahead and they get Alex Mack at the position. So it tends to be that they prefer the veteran option. However, JC Tretter does have injury issues. He's also older. And one thing that the 49ers have kind of shied away from this offseason, at least, is the age of players, right? You move on from Jaquiski Tartt. What do? Instead, you go get George Odom.
Right.
linebacker position, Oren Burks was a 25-year-old. At the cornerback position, it's not Stephon Gilmore and his kind of leadership in a way. It's the 25-year-old, 26-year-old Travarius Ward instead. So really at all the positions, the 49ers have valued the age and the potential of players over potentially the leadership and maybe the veteran presence of players. So that maybe tends to allude that we might go with the latter option, especially given how much the 49ers have praised the players currently at the position.
And it does make sense from a strategical standpoint. You're watching the 49ers continue to pay premium contracts at premium positions that they value to players that, a vast majority have come up within their system, and they're rewarding them with top of the market contracts. Well, as much as we want to say, well, the salary cap isn't real, you can just keep kicking the can down the road. It's very real. It's a very real set of rules that are in place. And within those rules, within the framework, you can do whatever the hell you want. But the rules are very real. You have to operate within them. And if you have a bunch of top end contracts, you then have to get creative in the way in which you fill out the remainder of the roster. And bringing in free agents that are a little more expensive, creating that middle class within your roster can hamstring you from doing any more of those elite level player contracts. If you can find the diamonds in the rough and get value with players on inexpensive contracts, in particular, get some starters that are on inexpensive contracts and will be on those inexpensive contracts for 2 or 3 more years, that could allow the 49ers to really build around Trey Lance once they've established just exactly what he is and they go full throttle for that Super Bowl run. I haven't gotten the sense that they're there quite yet. I get the sense they're hedging their bets just a little bit until they can confirm that information, and then they've reserved some chips to push into the middle of the table and go all in. That's at least my hope for what the 49ers are doing once they confirm Trey Lance is who they thought he was.
Yeah, and one other point I think that I want to allude to what you just said, right? Kind of pushing their bets and then choosing to go all in at some point. I think with Trey Lance, at least over the last 2 years, the 49ers have been in a full compete mode, and they've chosen to go after players on one-year deals. Last year, what did they do? Instead of trying to kind of get in new players on longer-term deals, which they did this offseason, they brought back K'Wan Williams, brought back Jaquasi Tart, brought back a number of these free agents, and they nowadays are planning for the future. You saw them draft Aaron Banks last year, knowing that Laken Tomlinson was likely to leave in free agency this year. A number of those one-year deals that they signed last year, K'Wan Williams, Jaquasi Tart, and all those guys I just mentioned, have left this offseason. And I think a big thing that the 49ers have encountered over the last couple of years is roster turnover. And with a young quarterback, especially with a guy that you at least invested so much in, I think they prefer the continuity, especially at the offensive line position, which directly impacts the quarterback. And so that's why I think they might be a little more might be a little more optimistic with the players that they have right now, because not only does it place trust in them, but it also continues the point of going away from roster turnover, which they've kind of tried to set the precedent for this offseason.
Continuity could be a great thing for Trey Lance. I could see the 49ers being very conscious of pursuing that strategy. Tom Bragg coming in with an interesting take on the Alex Mack situation. One that, quite frankly, if the team is unaware, I like the logic of this. If Mack retired now, he would really be screwing over the team. That's if they were unaware. I totally agree with Tom on that. I have to believe that he is a better person than that. He does strike you as a better person than that. I mean, his pictures of him getting married in Ireland, he looks so happy. He looks so carefree. I'm all about it. I'm all about it. So, Tom, I agree with you that if the 49ers are unaware of his intention at this point, and he then goes on to retire, it does strike me as being uncharacteristic to happen so late in the offseason and for the team to be unaware of that. Lee Ving pointing out hedging is the word of the day and the offseason. Lee, I want to take some credit for that. I feel like I was loud, vocal, and said it often early in this offseason, preaching that was my interpretation of how the 49ers were acting, that they have been hedging their bets just a little bit. Just a little bit. I'm not saying that to cast any dispersions on Trey Lance. I'm optimistic about Trey Lance, and I think the 49ers are waiting to confirm some things, giving themselves a little bit of flexibility for when they do confirm it. Lee also coming in to say Treader would be a last resort and could be gone before Jimmy's cap relief. I mean, we're talking about continuity and how JC Treader would be bringing in that outside body. You could stick with the continuity theme of the 49ers attempting to support Trey Lance in that way. They haven't been able to keep that continuity going when it comes to the coaching staff or the front office. And let's be honest, that's because the 49ers are a quality organization. They're a well-run organization. And so other teams around the league want to poach talent from a well-run organization. It's a logical approach. The 49ers have announced a ton of moves along the coaching staff. On March 7th, the 49ers officially announced 14 coaching changes, which included 6 departures in addition. So obviously Mike McDaniel, gone. Richard Hightower, gone. Rich Gangrello, gone. John Embry, Wes Welker, James Betcher, all gone. The 49ers' new hires, bringing in 9 coaches: Stephen Adegoke, James Craig, Joe Graves, Brian Greasy, the new quarterbacks coach, Anthony Lynn, one of my favorites, assistant head coach, running backs coach, Aswani Rufus, the offensive quality control, Brian Schneider, Deuce Schwartz, and Nick Sorensen coming in. The new titles were assigned as well, where people got promotions or just lateral moves. Brian Fleury coming in for the tight ends coach, Chris Forster as the offensive line run game coordinator, Leonard Hankerson, the great promotion to wide receiver coach, Clay Kubiak coming in as the assistant quarterback coach, and Bobby Slowick getting that new title of offensive passing game coordinator. Then there were the moves today that were announced. Again, people being poached from the 49ers front office. Ethan Wall was the 49ers VP of player personnel. He had just been promoted this offseason from a director of college scouting. Obviously, that move, which he didn't even get to sit in for more than a couple of months before he was poached, that move signals that the 49ers were looking to keep him. So that feels like a little bit of a loss there. He joins Trent Baalke in Jacksonville as the assistant GM, a promotion for him. Very glad that he gets to take that on, a new role for him in Jacksonville. He has a long working relationship with Trent Baalke, whom he worked with in San Francisco from 2005 through 2016. But again, of the two, and we'll pause here before we get to Demetrius Washington, get your reaction on the coaching losses, the coaching changes being something we've all gotten used to at this point. But now we're layering in some losses on the player personnel side as well in the front office. Do you believe that the continuity of the 49ers organization is being threatened by all of these promotions, hires, and lateral moves?
I do think that this doesn't necessarily harm the 49ers in terms of continuity, and I'll tell you why. Really, the main pieces are what's important for the 49ers, because this coaching kind of departure and arrival mechanism is really there with all teams, really, because coaches are obviously trying to move up the ranks. You
Right.
see teams trying to get the main roles and things like that. However, it's a complete overload in a way over the last couple of seasons. However, like you said earlier, right? You said the 49ers are a team that other franchises are trying to emulate, which is why they try, or other teams try and hire their people. And to me, that just is in a way a sign of respect, because we saw, I think you named it, about 14 departures or something like that this
Right.
season. And a lot of those departures were either for the similar role, which then provides them a better capacity in a new environment to try and elevate their role, or for an elevated role, like Mike McDaniel for head coach, like Zach Yenser to become the offensive line coach for Butch Berry, and then Zach Yenser, the same role over there in Kentucky. So you have a multitude of different roles everywhere is going. But to me, I think the 49ers really focused on one thing this offseason with their coaching hires, and that was at the main positions, which they've seemed to prioritize a little more. They tried to get experience. Look at the wide receivers coach, look at the running backs coach, and the quarterbacks coach. All three are in new roles this year. Leonard Hankerson was promoted from quality control coach to the wide receivers coach this year. He played wide receiver in the NFL. Anthony Lynn obviously played running back in the NFL. He's now the assistant head coach as well as the running backs coach. And then Brian Greasy, a guy who's never coached before, has played quarterback in the NFL. Kyle Shanahan alluded to him being the smartest mind he's ever coached, and now he's the quarterbacks coach. So they're trying to prioritize experience to try and get different things from their coaching staff, because that isn't something that they've necessarily had a ton of in the past, especially with guys like Wes Welker, who obviously played in the NFL, departing. Rich Scarangello, a guy who's been in a bunch of quarterback rooms. I know he's not necessarily the fan favorite. He also departed. So it's kind of trying to replace something that you had with something new or something that's already there. So in that way, to me, I think the continuity is staying, if not improving. And so that's where I'm not necessarily as worried about the coaching departures. Although it is, like we said with the roster, it is a ton of turnover year after year, given how much the 49ers have had success.
I have to extend some trust to Kyle Shanahan in this particular situation because we have seen this before, to your point. We have witnessed year in, year out that there will be coaching changes, and such is the life of a quality head coach within the NFL. That these people who work for him get their start, they get their shot. If they don't have a clear path to success within this organization, they're going to reach out for those other opportunities. They are going to jump when another team comes in and offers them that next step up the ladder so that they can advance their careers within the NFL. And I don't blame them in the least. What I mean by trusting in Kyle Shanahan is that he has been able to select coaches who have come in and picked up where the other coach has left off. I think DeMeco Ryans is a phenomenal example of that, where you see Robert Saleh, who comes in as an unheralded defensive coordinator who got a lot of heat when he was first with the San Francisco 49ers, but was beloved by the time he left to take that head coaching role with the Jets. A very similar path for DeMeco, although I think he had a more benefit of the doubt. Fans were very hyped on the defense that Saleh had just had, but there was some skepticism. Could he keep the defense at the level Robert Saleh had been able to do it? Well, what we saw last year gave us all a great deal of optimism. And I absolutely agree with Dan, who's a sneakerhead here on the channel, comes in to say, we need to take advantage of likely DeMeco Ryans last year with the San Francisco 49ers. Yet another illustration of a quality coach coming in, having success, needing to trust that Kyle Shanahan knew what he was doing when he promoted DeMeco from within. Turns out he sure as shit did know what he was doing. DeMeco came out and balled. And I think that this year, I mean, this is just off the cuff, but I want to get your stance on it. I think with the talent we have, with the bodies we added, and DeMeco taking the next step as defensive coordinator, I'm optimistic about this damn defense on paper. I look at this as a potentially top 3 defense in the league with the bodies that we have. Again, hypothetically on paper, you got to see how it all meshes. But are you sharing that optimism? Do you believe that this could be an elite defensive squad?
Hell yeah. Over the past couple of seasons, we've seen a good defense. Even in 2020, when we went 6-10, the defense was really what carried us to those 6 wins when we had such an injury-ravaged squad. And one thing real quick on the coaching staff, when we talk about the defense, right, the 49ers offensively, I think there isn't much of a worry because you have Kyle Shanahan. I think he's the main kind of guy that supports that offense. And really, when you have that one staple, the rest, while they're supporting pieces, it's okay for there to be roster turnover as long as that main guy stays. However, defensively, because none of those guys employ the coaching or head coaching position, those guys are where you'll see a lot more roster turnover, and those guys are where it might be a little more of an impact, which is why it's really important for the 49ers to nail that hire, which they did with DeMeco Ryans. Because if you don't necessarily have as good of a coach, those in-game adjustments, those little things that coaches do to kind of change the outcome of the game don't necessarily stay. And that's the difference between an elite defense and a good defense. And the 49ers, in my opinion, have an elite defense. And that's important for me because when you have an offense, especially around a rookie quarterback, that elite defense, you kind of expect them to take the big burden in a way for the first couple of weeks of the season at least. And I think the defense also carried its last year. And looking from last year to this year, it's hard to say that our defense got worse, even if we don't necessarily have a starter at the safety position currently. And so for me, with the top 3 defense in terms of total yards allowed last year, it's very, very optimistic for me to at least say that we'd have a top 5, top 7 defense this year.
I agree. And it all hinges as far as getting to that number 1 spot. To me, the health of Jason Verrett. And I'm going to show off these cleats every day until I get Jason Verrett on this program to commit to signing them, because I have held the faith, JV. I have held the faith. And I believe That can be the difference. A healthy Jason Verrett alongside Charvarius Ward and E-Man, I mean, forget about it. Forget about it. I will not be worried about the safety position if that's what happens. I want to bring in Kelts Chronicles Sneakerhead here on the channel as well, because I think it sums up that summary around the coaching staff, that turnover that occurred, those changes that have taken place along with the front office. Kelt's coming in to say we replaced 0 rings to 6 in the coaching staff. Lynn and Greasy 1-1 together, and Schneider and Sorensen 1-1 together. We brought a ton of Super Bowl experience for a reason. This is the optimistic side of me, and in combination with what I had seen and wasn't wild about in Kyle Shanahan getting tense in big moments. Kyle Shanahan has in the past, in a couple of very key moments, gotten fairly tight. And the results have shown for the 49ers, where in big games, sort of a surprising outcome has unfolded. This new blood, I believe, will be the sanity in his ear. You need a powerful voice that in that crunch time, in that moment where the pressure has built to its precipice, that you have a calm, reasoned voice in your ear. The Anthony Lynn hire, to me, is that voice for Kyle Shanahan. When I listened to Anthony Lynn as a speaker, as a leader of men, when I watched him on Hard Knocks, I said to myself, God damn, I would listen to that man. I would listen to that man, and I think Kyle Shanahan will as well. I believe that's going to be a voice that he respects, and I think they brought in several voices he can respect with this current coaching staff.
Most definitely, most definitely. And we've seen it, right? Like last year, the 49ers, they have a certain idea for which coaches they want to keep. I hope Lynn stays for more than just this year, especially when Bobby Turner returns.
That would be great.
You look at that example, Mike McDaniel, right? They promoted him to offensive coordinator when they normally haven't held an offensive coordinator during the Shanahan-Lynch era because they wanted to keep him. Obviously, they lose him this year, but that's important because I'm very interested to see, will the 49ers move Anthony Lynn to offensive coordinator next year in order to keep him? We'll see.
That is an interesting conundrum. I agree. It would be phenomenal to see Anthony Lynn and Bobby Turner together. I mean, I'm just jacked to get Bobby Turner back because he is my favorite coach. The man is 72 years young, and he is talking about, no, it's just a 1-year hiatus. You know, just getting a quick surgery to make sure I'm good for the next 15 years as I'm back out there. Bobby Turner is legend status. Bobby Turner is a god in my eyes. But Tom Bragg coming in to talk about that defense. We have the best defense in the league. Our defense will dominate so much so that Trey will not have the pressure on him to light up the scoreboard. He will just have to take care of the football. It does feel fairly intentional to stack that defense because we did have the offensive weapons in place. So that's going to be interesting. Watching Trey Lance with an elite defense, how does that turn out? Well, it's a great point to transition to talking about the schedule. How will this season play out? How will the 49ers fare against their opponents? Before we jump into a couple of specific topics referencing the schedule, Rohan, I just wanted to get your overall thoughts on the 49ers schedule, considering that we knew the opponents they were going to face. That's not new knowledge. We knew who all the teams were that we were coming up against. It was going to be a difficult schedule. The 49ers have what, the 4th or 5th hardest strength of schedule within the league. Did the NFL schedule makers do the Niners any favors with the way the games were actually laid out?
I'd like to think so. And obviously, when I say this, we take it with a grain of salt because of the statistic you just said. Tied for 5th in terms of strength of schedule, meaning the opponents we face are going to be hard based on last year's record. Now, normally strength of schedule isn't the best indicator because it'll vary year by year because obviously like a team like the Bengals back in 2020 were 4-12, the worst team in the division. They end up going to the Super Bowl in 2021. However, when you look at the teams that the 49ers face, most of those teams are fairly relevant to what their status was the year past. And some actually improved, right? You look at the Chargers, you look at the Broncos as the two main examples, as well as the Dolphins. I think all of those 3 teams improved, maybe even a significant amount. But when you look at how the schedule is placed, I think the 49ers kind of got away with one in a way, because especially when I'm looking at that week 9 to 15 stretch right in the middle of the season, The 49ers don't leave the West. And for a team that travels a ton, 22 time zones this year, not leaving the West for a significant portion, especially when that is kind of like the period where you really need to pull yourself together before that end of the year stretch. I think that that is a little bit of a favor for the 49ers, even if they're facing tough opponents at the time, like the Dolphins, Chargers, Saints, Cardinals, and the Buccaneers.
I love that stretch as well. Love anytime the Niners can minimize that travel. You picked out three teams that are vastly improved in my book. Miami, absolutely. Denver, I mean, come on. Russell Wilson, yeah, we've got some issues with Russell Wilson. Seems to be a little bit of kryptonite. I do want to get into what you believe the toughest stretch of games are. I just got to bring in the super chat. You know I got to bring in the super chat. CT Law, Sneakerhead here on the channel. CT, what's up? I'm sticking with my original stance, CT says. Jimmy will be here. Trey will start with them saying Jimmy is not, with them saying, I'm guessing Jimmy's, not Jimmy. Trey is not ready yet. If Trey Lance splits it, Jimmy comes in and saves the day. Debo, I think, is on the fence for Trey Lance. Okay, so a couple of points within there to discuss. One, CT believing that Jimmy will be here and that Trey will start. I see. So maybe, no, he is talking about Jimmy. He's saying Jimmy won't be ready from injury yet. Okay, so my interpretation of the comment has shifted from what I initially, as I was reading it, was thinking. But yes, Jimmy's going to be here. Trey's going to start. They're saying the reason that Jimmy's not starting is because he's still recovering from injury. We're going to let Trey Lance have those reps. We're going to let him have some leash. But if he doesn't do well, they can turn back to Jimmy and allow him to save the day. Final point being that, hey, one of the biggest stars on the team, Debo, may not be sold for Trey Lance. I'll start with that one. I just don't know that I've seen any evidence to support Debo not being on the fence or being on the fence, not being in favor of Trey Lance. I've seen enough clips of Debo in close proximity to Trey, with the body language, with the limited things that he said about him. I still think that Debo does enjoy Jimmy Garoppolo as a teammate, as do most of the starting players on the 49ers, as do, I'm sure, most of the teammates on the 49ers with regard to Jimmy G. He's a good teammate, but I just don't see any evidence that Trey Lance isn't also a good teammate. We heard about him reaching out to all of the rookies, getting the leadership under his belt, being the guy to really welcome them to the organization, as he is the face of the organization. But to the meat of your point, CT, I do have to acknowledge there's a very real possibility, although I view it as a slight one, that Jimmy Garoppolo remains on this roster throughout the season. In my mind, that happens if the 49ers say to themselves, we do want to insulate the position. We are going to go to Jimmy and say, hey, listen, we're going to cut you if we can't get a deal done, but we'd like to keep you around. We think that there's not an open starting spot for you anywhere in the league. This is a place you can have success. This is a place you can add value. This is a place where if you get a chance to start some games due to injury, you could revive that career and get traded or signed next offseason, and the 49ers could get a compensatory draft pick out of that whole conundrum. That's the only scenario I see Jimmy sticking around. I can't see them paying him his entire salary and letting him play out that final year of his contract.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, it is somewhat interesting, and I won't dismiss it, just because the 49ers have seemed to value draft picks, especially compensatory picks, fairly highly. And you get a third-round pick out of this. The 49ers have actually valued those third-round picks fairly high, be it through minority coach hirings or whatever it may be. But they've drafted pretty well with those third-round picks, or maybe not drafted well, but they've at least looked to draft with those picks. They were all obviously fairly staunch with their choice of draft picks earlier this offseason when trying to trade Garoppolo. Reports said a second-round pick, whatever it may be, while Matt Ryan went for a third-round pick. Yeah, 2 seconds. Oh, boy. But when you look at it, that might be the one case why the 49ers may carry him, because they do view that third-round pick as important, and they might not use that $27 million that Garoppolo has. Now, do I agree with it? Not necessarily, because you can carry that $27 million over to 2023, have extra cap space, not only to sign your guys, but also with an exploded cap, be able to get other guys in and go really full all in if that isn't the case in this year.
Yes, save the ammunition for the big move. Don't waste it on a little bit of backup energy. I'm with you on that. I'm absolutely with you on that. All right, we're jumping back into the schedule, and I teased it before we got away for the super chat, but the toughest stretch of games. What do you see as the toughest couple of games there in a row where the 49ers are going to have some adversity coming their way?
I've got to go with right before the stretch I talked about earlier, starting with week 7 when we face the Kansas City Chiefs, going to week 8 facing Los Angeles in LA, and then after the bye week, we don't start off easy. We start off tough, facing the Chargers at home and then the Cardinals. Now, while some of those games, I think 2 of those 4 games are at home and then one's at a neutral site, the teams that we face are fairly tough. And then in addition, we're coming off 2 road games going into Kansas City, both on the eastern side. So I think that there is a little bit of a schedule maneuvering thing there where you have to be prepared. Obviously, the 2 biggest test matches to start the year are in week 3 and 4 with Denver, and then the Los Angeles Rams. But this stretch here of 4 games, and even if you want to include the next couple of games as well, but I think it's this stretch of 4 games that are really, really important where you don't want to get carried away and potentially go on a 3 or a 4 game losing streak.
We are in complete alignment on this thought. Now, maybe not complete. I had it marked down as weeks 7 through 10, just a 3-game stretch. I didn't have the game against the Cardinals creeping in there, but I agree with you as you make that case. And the reason for me is you come in and it's KC at home, but it's KC at home after a 2-game East Coast trip. And the 49ers have historically done well on those East Coast trips, but then they have a trap game when they come back. And KC sets up to be no trap game, but they do have a letdown when they return from those long East Coast stints. Then obviously going down to Levi's South at SoFi Stadium, you could argue, hey, 49ers have the Rams name when it comes to the regular season. I just don't know that you can really say that after the matchup that occurred in the NFC Championship game. I don't know that you can differentiate the regular season from the postseason. I think that NFC Championship established a bit more of an even playing field when it comes to the 2 organizations, and therefore I view that as a difficult game. If the 49ers struggle and or lose both of those games going into the bye, the fervor would begin to rise. The fan base would be anxious at that point, and you've got a whole freaking bye week to let that grow and let the pressure mount on the 49ers and then come back to play the Chargers, a vastly improved team to your earlier point. I mean, that pass rush with the Bosa brother adding in Mack could be a phenomenal pass rush. If Khalil Mack returns to form, the Chargers will be a formidable defense for the 49ers to go up against. And that seems like a potential likely outcome. So I agree with you there on the most difficult stretch of games. Let's flip the script on that. What do you view as the easiest stretch of games for the 49ers in the 2022 season?
I'll go early in the season, and I'll just go with the first 2 weeks. And the reason is, while it's only a 2-week stretch, I thought it was extremely important for Trey Lance to at least get some sense of not necessarily easiness, because no game is necessarily easy in the NFL, but some sense of a relief or a breather going into the season so that Trey Lance can acclimate himself in the NFL environment. And so to me, I thought those first 2 games facing Chicago, which might be one of the worst teams in the NFL this entire year, especially after losing Khalil Mack and Allen Robinson, their 2 biggest contributors on both sides. And then you face Seattle, which is a home game. While it's a division game, it's a home game against the Seattle roster that is facing a ton of turnover after the losses of Russell Wilson and their tackle Dwayne Brown, as well as Bobby Wagner. So their 3 main veterans kind of departed the team this season, which means there's a ton of turnover, a ton of new young talent. And so they might not have founded their identity this early in the season. So I think this 2-game stretch early on before facing their first test in a high altitude in Denver is an important stretch for them to go 2-0 and really a good way to start the season. And I think that is the easiest stretch for you.
It certainly is. I love it when you're right, because then all I have to do is agree with you, good sir. Kurt comes in, sneakerhead here on the channel. Rob, gotta love the first 2 weeks to get some Yes, get the young man some confidence under center. Allow him a little cushion a little cushion. And how great is it to feel like a portion of that cushion is the Seattle Seahawks? Man, that makes me smile from ear to ear to believe that Seattle is going to suffer a little bit this year. I tell you, I've never been able to let go of the 2012 NFC Championship game. I rolled out there to Seattle, drove up from Portland, Oregon, had a beautiful seat at the 50-yard line in the club level section. And you figure when you're around people that, have a little bit, that are at the 50-yard line seats, that they're going to act with some sense, right? That they're going to be a little more polite. No, it didn't stop me from getting peanuts pelted at the back of my head with my big Jerry Rice jersey. I was a prime target for a little bit of harassment. And unfortunately, that game ended the way it did, and leaving that stadium was harsh. So I love watching the Seahawks potentially struggle this year. I will be elated. When I was there in Seattle last year, man, that game felt good for a little bit until it went the wrong direction. So let's get some payback. Agree, the Bears are an easy first win, if there is such a thing as an easy win within the NFL. The Seahawks at home, I even lump in the Broncos game there, because while I agree with you, it is their first significant test, I still do think the 49ers are fortunate in facing the Broncos so early in the season, before Russell Wilson has a real chance to acclimate himself to the new system and really become comfortable and regain that Russell Wilson of old form. It potentially Jerry Jeudy suspended at that point in the season. It's unclear what the details of his charges are at this point, but I think there's a solid chance for the 49ers to jump out to a 3-0 start here.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. That's definitely fair.
Absolutely. So let's transition a little bit to the biggest potential trap game for the 49ers, where going into it, fans are saying to themselves, it's a cakewalk. Niners got this one. Just no chance they lose it. Much like, I don't know, the Atlanta game in 2019. You never know how these games are going to come out. How do you believe which game do you believe the 49ers will stumble into that has the potential to be one of those trap games?
So I'll point out one game and then I'll point out the next. And the first game is surprisingly against the same team that I said was an easy game just now, and that is the Seattle Seahawks on the road. And I'll tell you why. The 49ers are going to be traveling on a short week, going into Seattle on a Thursday to play in the cold December weather over there in Seattle. The 49ers are coming off a really tough Week 14 matchup against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and then the Miami Dolphins before that. While both are at home, they're still two tough matchups. So you're going from two tough matchups into a road game where the Seattle Seahawks are playing at home against the Carolina Panthers in Week 14, meaning there's no travel for them on a short week, meaning that they should be fairly acclimated to the weather as well. So I think that the situation is at least favorable for the 49ers. And given that it's a division game, those division games are always tough regardless of opponent and quality of opponent. We saw that last year when a 6-10 Seahawks team beat us twice, and then a Cardinals team that that was worse than us kind of beat us also. So I think that it is important for the 49ers to kind of treat that game in a way like a Tampa Bay game with full preparation, because I think that could be a potential trap game.
I think that's a very astute observation, in particular the short week division game. And let's not discount Pete Carroll. I mean, we like to make fun of him and his ridiculous gum chewing, but the dude is a good coach and he gets people to play for him. He gets them to play hard. I have no doubt that team will be ready to compete against the San Francisco 49ers. That has the potential to be a trap game. I'm going to go a few weeks earlier in the 49ers coming up against the Saints. Again, very similar reasoning, though. The 49ers are coming back from a home game against the Cardinals in Mexico. So it's deceptively long travel. It feels like, Mexico to California. That's not all that far. But it is a little bit of travel in there. There's a few miles. It's a short damn week. The Niners are coming off of 5 days rest with those additional freaking miles. The Saints roster is talented, but teams are going to be tempted to overlook them with the uncertainty at quarterback. And you have Mike McDaniel on the calendar for the next week. So you got to ask yourself, does Kyle get a little ahead of himself? Does he say, well, we got the Saints game in the bag. I got my eyes on Mike McD. I got to make sure that my protege feels my wrath when we play Miami, and maybe he overlooks an opponent. I hope that's not the case. I don't think that's going to be the case. And you do have to throw on your conspiracy hat and say to yourself, with some weird comments today, Dan brought it in earlier, so I thought I'd bring it up. Drew Brees? Is there any possibility? I don't think so. But anytime someone teases coming out of retirement, in particular with what Tom Brady did to all of us this offseason, you have to at least entertain it to some degree. All right, let's transition into that next topic and hit up the idea of the most difficult road game.
So the 49ers have essentially 7 road games with one at the alternate site. I won't count the Cardinals game. So when we look at it, we face the Rams in week 8, the 2 games in week 5 and 6 against NFC South opponents, the Bears in week 1. And then to me, though, it's not those games, although the Rams could be in contention, and rather it's that week 17 New Year's game against the Las Vegas Raiders. And what that is, both of these teams should be competing for the playoffs at this point. Obviously, this is going to be a loud environment over there in Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas. I think that it will be a playoff environment in a way. And the 49ers are going to be coming off a game against the Commanders in week 16, traveling over there to Las Vegas. And I just think that this game, the environment around it, and given that it's at the end of the year when teams are tired, I think that this might be the most difficult road opponent, especially given that we face the 2 other AFC West teams at home.
I am in lockstep with you on Vegas, week 17. I got to take a moment to give credit to Lee Ving for this zinger coming in. Breeze going to give his new hair back to NBC. Ouch. From a bald man, Lee. Ouch. That's just a shot at Drew Brees. Yes, no, I am in lockstep. Vegas, week 17, potential most difficult road game. Temptation is going to be there to party the night before. It is going to be New Year's Eve in Las Vegas. I will be there. I will be out and about. I will be a little unrested for that game in Vegas. So will the 49ers be in the hunt with Arizona and therefore already be looking forward to week 18 in some respect? Are the Raiders going to be in the mix within the AFC West? This has the potential to go either way. If the AFC West is as competitive as many have labeled it, then potentially the Raiders are out of the mix, and it's a far less crucial game in week 17. But if they're in the hunt, this one strikes me as the hardest road game. Flip the script on that bad boy. Let's talk about the most difficult home game for the San Francisco 49ers.
I've got to go week 14, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And the reason is I think there are 2 games, in my opinion, that can compete. That is the Charger game in week 10, who I think are one of the most loaded teams in the NFL. But coming off a game against Miami, I think it's got to be Tom Brady and company, because obviously you still have Trey Lance in his first year. And I think the Buccaneers can compete for the number 1 overall seed in the NFC this year. So it's a tough game. And it's also off a grueling schedule in a way where you face the Chargers, Cardinals, Saints, and Dolphins back to back to back to back. While you are at home, I think that this will be somewhat of a tough game and probably the most difficult home game with the Chargers coming in as a close second.
You've made a compelling case and nearly swayed me from my own selection right there. But I got to give it to the Kansas City Chiefs. And maybe I'm still lingering with the sadness that I have carried with me since my flight out to Miami, where I watched the Chiefs come back in the Super Bowl and take us down. But it's the placement of the game for me. It's where it falls in the schedule. It's because of that 2-game road trip that I mentioned. You're coming off of what I believe the 49ers will make into an extended road trip on the East Coast, where they have done that in years prior. They'll stay over in between the games before playing the Atlanta Falcons. And both of those are easy games, so to speak. They are still NFL caliber teams. But the San Francisco 49ers have, again, historically struggled when they get back from that road trip. They are not as well rested. Their bodies just haven't had a chance to catch up. And I know KC is going to be coming across the country, but they do seem to have a little bit of a mental edge. I think that's a big brother type of a game where the 49ers will be trying to get a monkey off of their back from that Super Bowl loss. Before we hit our last topic, and we are closing in on the end of this show, I do want to say that Rohan's information is down below in the description of the video. You need to go down there. You need to follow my man on Twitter. You need to subscribe on YouTube. All of that is down there. So don't miss out on that. And while you're at it, hit the like button on the video. Consider subscribing to this channel if you're not already. If you're not subscribed to this channel, though, I got to ask you, what's going on in your life? I mean, do we need to talk? Do we need to have a one-on-one conversation? If so, reach out to me. I'm very accessible. Joey Mellon, sneakerhead here on the channel, bringing in the super chat. Who's more dangerous to the Niners? Pete Carroll or Russell Wilson? Hope Vegas was fun. What was your favorite meal? Ooh, favorite meal while I was in Vegas. We had a good one at, was it strip steak that I ate at? Phenomenal steak. It was at the MGM Steakhouse. It was not a cheap meal by any stretch of the imagination, but it was phenomenal, as is the case in Vegas. If you want premium food, if you're going out there for week 17, bring a little bit of coin with you. That's the reality. All right, what do you view as the more dangerous to the Niners, Pete Carroll or Russell Wilson?
I got to go with Russ, especially in this situation now. Pete Carroll, great coach for sure, but I've got to go with the guy who puts the product on the field. At least now that we're kind of facing both teams this year, I personally view Russ as the bigger threat. He kind of catapulted the Broncos into playoff contention from their misery kind of days over the past couple of years. So I got to go with Russ.
I think you're right about that. I wanna shy away from Russ because, quite honestly, him and his good-natured personality sometimes just rub me the wrong way. I want to disrespect it a little bit, but I can't. He's too nice of a guy, and I'm too nice of a guy, so I have to give him his respect. I have to say that the man absolutely can ball on the field. His mobility is just hard to predict. He's so wily, so incredibly intelligent, a heady football player with the physical skill set to match it up. And people in the comments agree. Kurt Wilson, not close. His high holiness, Wilson, coming in. Yes, I believe that that is the case. And I also agree with Darren just coming in to say that Rohan has always been a good dude. Always. Ever since I've known him. Ever since we met at the beginning of this show. No, we've met on call-in shows and many times before. All right, last topic before we close out. I got to get over 6:15 start time with Jack Hammer on his program to break down the schedule game by game. So if you're watching this, take yourself a little quick bathroom break after we hit this last topic and join me again to talk more Niners, because that's all I do. Even when I'm not on camera, people are like, dude, do you ever shut up about the San Francisco 49ers? No, I do not. All right, so the last topic that we're closing out on here, better record, home or away? The home field advantage doesn't seem all that real with Levi's Stadium. It is, place that we joke about a curse. It is a building that doesn't get much respect. It pales in comparison to Candlestick Park. Wow. Is this a year where the Niners have a better home record than road record?
Nope. Levi's is a curse, but I mean, just looking at it schedule-wise, I don't think that's the case. We face the Bears, Panthers, Falcons, and the Seahawks on the road, even though I alluded to it as a trap game. I think those are four very winnable games as compared to our home schedule. I think our home schedule is just tougher. Additionally, we do play 9 games at home. And when you look at the strength of schedule, most of those teams that are amongst the top in that strength of schedule ranking are also games that we face at home, including the Chargers, the Chiefs, the Buccaneers, then improving teams like the Dolphins. I mean, the Saints, you can't ever discount them, and of course the Rams. So I got to go with the road schedule, although hopefully we play better at home this year.
Yes, that is my hope, and I am going to be optimistic on this one. I think it's going to be very close. In going through, obviously, way too early schedule prediction, I have the 49ers conservatively at an 11-6 record. The way I have that breaking out game by game, I agree with the comment from Tom here saying our 3 toughest games are at home. So we'll probably have a better road record than home record. I have us losing those 3 toughest games at home, but I have us running the table on the remainder. So I have it a 6-3 edge at home to a 5-3 edge on the road. A half game difference establishing a concrete home field advantage for the San Francisco 49ers. One that will, erase any talk of Levi's being a curse. No, not at all. We will joke about that for years to come until we win that 6th Lombardi. That will keep going because Candlestick is better That's why. This has been a fantastic show. I got to take a quick break to get a little more water. Then I'm on with Jack on his channel. Rohan, thank you. Rohan, sorry, so much for being here today. Absolutely enjoyed your contributions. Thought that this was a great dialogue, and I look forward to having you back on the program, good sir.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much for having me. Obviously, you have a great channel, do a lot for your subscribers, and I look forward to doing that as well. And chat, make sure you subscribe, make sure you like, hit that like button. As one guy in the chat always says, Debo that like button. And yeah, great program today.
Yes, absolutely. Debo that like button. I will be back on the channel with the mailbag episode tomorrow. Look for the tweet. We'll go out from the left shoe at about 8 or 9 a.m. Let the questions roll in. I cap at about 1 or 2 p.m. All those questions get answered 5 p.m. on this channel. Until then, you all know the drill. Cheers, Niner faithful.